Well, hello everybody. When life throws you a few curveballs, takes you off the path of the direction that you set, your relationships are suffering, the job is not what you love doing, and you find a few more speed humps or even potholes, finding your flow to get you back on track is what you need. So that's the topic of today's episode with Lynda Tregoweth. She's back again. Hey, Lynda.
Hey, Darren.
Nice
Thanks
to
for
have
having
you
me
on this show again.
back.
It's episode 149. And as we mentioned, this show's going to be about finding your flow.
Yeah,
So, Linda is a performance coach specializing in emotional intelligence and shows individuals and leaders how to eliminate stress, reduce conflict, and lead with confidence in all areas of their life. She is passionate about how we turn up every day as our true self. The demand is for richer human interactions built on trust. Authenticity creates an ecosystem of attraction whereby we work and play with people who are in alignment with us, our tribe. Linda has spent nearly 3 decades working with leaders, teams, and passionate people to help them unlock their full potential. But to do that, she had to first discover herself. Having had a few life-defining aha moments along the way, she's overcome devastating loss, significant health issues. She's now fit and healthy and has built personal resilience that has found her sweet spot. Linda realized that she couldn't do it alone in life and in business, and so she found the help she needed to achieve her growth. As a result, she's an expert in assisting others in releasing the pressure, gain clarity, find their safe harbor, and enjoy calm confidence. Linda is a student of life, travel, and human behavior and loves everything to do with unlocking the unlimited potential within herself and others. So, Linda, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Darren. What a great intro.
That was, I practiced that one.
Yeah, well, you have said it before, but hey, it was a while ago, probably like 50 episodes ago. I don't know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, tell us a bit about you. I mean, has anything changed in the way you work since we spoke last? And then we'll get into some of the stuff that we're going to chat about today.
Well, I think for the first thing, and we're just talking about it, is I've moved into state. So I was living in Melbourne for the last 17 years, and it was just after the borders opened up here in Australia that I
Nice.
made the move to Queensland. And why did I do that? I moved to Queensland because a few years ago I was looking to move here, and I figured it was about time. I built up an amazing life there in Melbourne, but I felt that without any overseas travel, I felt like I needed to explore another state. And
Yep,
we've got a beautiful big country here in Australia, so why not do that? So
we do.
here I am. So yeah, so
Awesome. I love Brizzy. I haven't been there in a while, but I love Brizzy. It's
yeah,
becoming more and more cosmopolitan every day. It's great.
yeah, I definitely found a couple of good coffee places.
Yep.
I do love Brisbane, but there is an opportunity if any of our Melbourne or Sydney friends want to move up here and do good stuff with hospitality. There's still room to move, I reckon.
Oh, absolutely.
Got a couple of places here that are pretty awesome. Like can't shake loose the Melburnian in me, which is Industry Beans. They've got a place
Oh,
there.
okay.
Not
Nice.
pretty happy with that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. You like your coffee like me.
yeah, certainly. Yeah,
So,
got one right
Linda, oh, yeah, can't do without it.
here.
So, I'd love to chat a little bit about, what life is for everybody these days, what challenges we're facing. Maybe you can shed some light on what you're noticing, what you've noticed lately about, how people are handling things and what they're facing now than they might not have been facing before.
I think it's interesting if we look at work, not everything is equal. And, I do some work with a fantastic man called Bruce, who is has a coaching business in the joinery industry. They've done exceptionally well the joinery industry's done exceptionally well because people have been sitting at home, working from home and looking at their houses and looking at all the things that they want to change. So that's
Yep.
a beautiful opportunity for those clients. But the other part of what I do for my own clients is I service the individuals, if you like, who are sitting at home wanting to make those changes in their houses, but now various different forms of lockdown, and certainly right around the world,
Yep.
we haven't been able to go and work in those places that we once called our workplaces, because there's been a lot of restrictions. So while we talk about the pandemic or COVID, during COVID, I hear this a lot. During COVID, we weren't able to do, and I'm like, well, we're still living through COVID. We just don't have all those restrictions in place.
That's right.
But what I'm hearing from the clients who've been working from home is that they've been working with their families at home. Daycare or schools haven't been open through that period of time, through 2020.
Yep.
And there's certainly been restrictions, even if states and cities haven't been in lockdown, there's still been a lot more restrictions, social distancing and such. And those things still exist, albeit certainly here in Queensland, I don't see so much of that. But I think there's a lot around how have people been working at home with their little ones running around while on the phone trying to do business, or trying to work when they've got like 5 other family members trying to work from home. And I think it's been quite stressful. Now, I was looking at some stats around, I know you'll probably ask me this question, but some stats on relationships and how people have been working together, because ultimately we wouldn't be spending so much time with each other. And I think, that's certainly taken its toll on our well-being and mental health. And I think, stats right now for Melbourne, for example, have been in lockdown for so long, 1 in 3 people are suffering from some sort of mental health issues. And there's much more of a reliance on utilising services either from the workplace or generally, I think coaches probably taken off in terms of being able to help with that stuff too. But really, people have been really able to tap into some different services or have a different level of awareness because they've faced different things in their day-to-day. So I think it's been quite an interesting time for many, many people, but not all industries are the same. And some industries have thrived and some people are just in survival mode as a result of the last 12 months.
That's right. That's right. I did a great episode with another friend of mine and also a psychologist. And she said, she used the phrase, people had to learn how to work with home rather than work from home. And it really stuck in my head because it's so true. It's working with home. And there's a whole new set of boundaries and controls that you have to set up possibly to do that well.
Well, you and I, we've probably both been working from home for quite some time, so we're used to it.
Yeah.
But, I think for me, the main difference working during that period of lockdown was the restriction and actual physical interaction with people because we couldn't. So, but I'm really happy working from home, always have, and have really good structures and systems in place and have my workstation set up so I'm all health and safety compliant and do all those things that I would have perhaps once done in an actual office environment, but I'd still do that at home. Now, it's not the case for everyone. I've heard people have been working from the floor and having meetings in the corner of their, what looks like their laundry because it's their spare room, but that's like ultimately their storage room and there's clothes in the background and they've got kids running in and out. And I just think some people just haven't ever been set up for that. And certainly some of those businesses weren't well placed to help their teams get set up. Yeah. I think people have been going into what was the office and taking, things like monitors and getting all that stuff set up. But that also then means they've got to take it all back when they're needing to go back and work in the office too. So, really does come down to systems and how you set yourself up and how you think about approaching your day and what you need. I know what I need on my desk. Yes, coffee's one of those things, but, to me, it's just the same as how I would have been working anywhere.
And also, I suppose it depends on who you are as a person. Like I'm very good on my own. I can work from home. I'm very good with technology. And if I get a bit lonely, I just go to the coffee shop or I take a walk or I see some people or I jump on Zoom. But not everybody's like that. Some people really crave that, hallway, water cooler conversation. They need to have interaction with their colleagues constantly. They need that energy that keeps them going. So it's tough for some people.
Well, it was really interesting. I was talking to an ex-colleague and dear friend of mine, and she went back to work in the city once, sort of they got the notice that they could do that, and she found it really interesting. She said, I might as well have just stayed at home, because she found that the office wasn't set up to cater for social distancing with, say, project teams and such. So, whether the office was mainly a floor plan of smaller meeting rooms, so 2 or 4 meeting, capacity meeting rooms, and then maybe a meeting room capacity of 12 was the largest. But when you've got a social distance, there's no space to allow that. And
That's right.
what she found was that they would each have to go and find their own space in this particular building, in this particular office, socially distant, very, very strict rules, obviously, with social distancing in these offices, to even be able to let people into the lifts or building itself, let alone their office floor. And she said, we were all on Zoom in our own spaces, not even being able to really interact with each other too much, because social distancing didn't allow for that. Really interesting, hey? So you and I working from home, doing this is our normal. Hadn't really thought about how do you get up in a, say, 40-story building with social distancing in a lift, where normally that lift capacity would be 16 people.
That's right. It's like logistically, it's a nightmare.
To even get up to your floor would be it would take often longer than minutes. Definitely.
Yeah.
So they're now opting to not work from home. Not work in the office, rather. It's work from home as their normal. But then you do miss out on those social interactions. I do know that when cafes went open, which is my normal jam too, is to be able to go in there and have a chat to the guys and making coffee, or to be able to invite a colleague or one of your network or friend and to have a coffee. Like, without all of that, then certainly I missed it. But to not work in an office and not be able to interact with those people, that is kind of like your normal way. I think it would be a bit of a stretch and a challenge, which I think has really had a huge impact on people's mental health and well-being generally. We underestimate how much of that social interaction that we actually really need to do our day and feel good about it.
What have you found in terms of your experience, or if you have any stats on how that's impacted the team spirits and the team's performance, corporate team spirit and performance?
I attended a human synergistics thing last year, where we're actually trying to problem solve how we would deal with workplace culture with remote working. I think it was a hard thing to land on. We came up with a whole lot of solutions. There was over 1,000 people at this particular event. It was a virtual event.
Wow.
And really well done. So they're a fantastic group of people focused on culture, and they have analytic tools, and that's part of what I do to utilise them. And I don't remember the exact stats, because it was an Australian New Zealand event, but I do know that per industry it was quite different. But I think the fundamental thing was, as society, how we cope and how we set ourselves up for success in terms of our social interactions was the underlying principle of then how to set an organisation or a culture up in a business. So rather than, I think the old school thinking was the organisation needs to change. And for me, it comes back to a really good humming culture where everyone's working well together is where an individual chooses to participate and be engaged in the work they do in that environment. Yep. I think one thing about a lot of remote working is, if people do need that social connection, then how do those businesses, how do the organisations really help enable that for individuals? I think that's something definitely that needs to be done and thought about a lot more. I know as an HR group of professionals that I was sort of part of this conversation with, that there's a lot more discussion to be had around how to make that work, and especially where an organisation's culture is not always robust or sound anyway. So you can imagine if you've got a business which is very siloed and the teams across the business don't always work well or talk well to each other anyway, I believe that the remote working could have a bigger impact on that, if and the productivity, of course, because culture and productivity and customer experience are all deeply linked, that they're really going to suffer through that if they hadn't dealt with that. So they need to work a lot quicker and faster in fixing that and getting some smart thinking in there to help them with that. And then really those leaders need to be set up for success for managing those individuals within teams to be able to help with their own personal change first.
Yep.
Because to change a culture, you've got to start with an individual's change.
Definitely. And as well, you've got all these new tools, collaborative tools that people are using and workplaces are using to get stuff done, where you don't need to talk to anybody anymore. So it's even more isolating. So it's really about how do we balance that out with real life interaction.
Well, thinking back, I was. Are you familiar with the Net Promoter System?
No.
Okay, so it's something. If you've had any service through any utility company in Australia, or any major company, they'll ask you, how did you feel about the service that you received? And sometimes it'll be a little short survey at the end of the call or at the end of a chat, for example. So that's all related to, it used to be called satisfaction, customer satisfaction.
Customer satisfaction.
Yeah, so I think about the Net Promoter System, and these days they combine it with people from, I think Net Promoter for People is what they call it.
Yep.
But I first came across this when I was working for Telstra, and there were lots of issues. Everyone's got a Telstra story that they don't love, but at the same time, it's all big businesses anywhere, or even small businesses. We all have good and bad experiences. But what I like about this Net Promoter thing, and I'll give you a summarized version of it, is that it helps to look at where people sit on a scale of, it does have an underlying score, but whether someone's passive or if they're a detractor or if they're, going to be an advocate. And I think that applies for customers, and it also applies for staff.
Yep.
And I say to my clients, where do you sit in terms of whether you're a passive person in your business, or if you're a leader in your business, or if you're an advocate, or if you're a detractor? If you're a person that comes to work every day and says, I'm just not that into it today,
yep.
Or it's a bit like, I've got nothing good to say about where I'm working or who I'm doing it with. Or if you're an advocate, well, it's the loud, proud, let's get on with it, let's get into it, I'm really engaged and happy. Doesn't always have to be a box of fluffies and sunshine and roses every day, but it's about, I feel stimulated and connected to the work I do, and I'm proud of it, and I'm passionate about it. And you know why you're doing it. So it comes back to your purpose and why. It's the same thing for the customer experience, I believe. And, I think the key is, if anyone's listening to this today and they're thinking about what's going on with their culture, is what does it sound like? What are people saying about how they're feeling about working where they're working? And if you're a listener, who's an employee or a leader or an owner of a business, then it's a good question to ask yourself too. It's something that I ask myself, and how I show up.
Yep.
But you've got to start with, if someone's on the fence and they're like, not that into it, any given day, I'm just coming here for the paycheck.
Yep.
Probably not enough to really have an engaged workforce or an engaged culture where people are actually going to want to work together.
Fascinating. I mean, and I always say culture is felt more than it is seen. It's something that you feel, it's something that you perceive. It's so hard to define it with words. You have to really experience it.
A lot of people I talk to say, I know I've got a really great team. And then you get into it. I'm like, okay, how do you communicate with your team? What do you need to, when you want them to do something different, how is it that you guys work together? Oh, well, I've always got one person in my team who's like always pushes my buttons, or that person over there doesn't want to talk to many people. They just want to come into work and just, put their head down and their bum up and not really engage or talk to anyone.
Yep. That's
okay to a degree, but it has a profound effect on the vibe of your business, how you want to show up in your day, and how the team trust each other. I think it's
sure.
If all of those things are happening, then pay some attention to it, because it's not all as it seems. Like, we want to think the best of people, and that's true. It's a good default position, but pay attention to what's lying underneath, because that iceberg effect means that we haven't really spotted some things that might actually hurt the business over time, or hurt the team. Can't make everyone like each other. It's not about that. It's just how do you help them understand what the common purpose is so they can do it together and do it well without as much friction or people getting annoyed or frustrated with each other.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Common purpose, like your why, from a company point of view, from a personal point of view, it's so important. Why do
Yeah.
we do anything?
And I was talking to someone this morning, and that's the thing that we all lose sight of is what's our why.
Hmm.
We get busy, we forget to pay attention to what we need. And if most of us like to help other people, and if we don't, then we're just doing our own thing in the corner, and that's okay to some degree. It'd probably be a bit of an isolated life and you miss out on opportunities if that happens. But for most part, most people like to help others. And it's when we don't say no without saying no that we, kind of we start to just doing more for other people and forget about ourselves. And then over time, we forget who we are. And
Yep.
I think you asked me the other day, what is it that's commonly coming up for my clients? And I think the biggest thing in the last week is sense of overwhelm and just so much going on, they don't know where to start, and not getting really clear on how to go about it. And then the other thing is to really, a lot of them are really feeling like they've lost themselves. And then it affects things like their relationships. It affects how they see their career. They're probably getting a little bit burnt out in some part of their life, and whether it's through working longer hours or just trying to make things work in some part of their life that isn't probably a fit for them anymore.
Yep.
But we forget to sort of check in with ourselves on that stuff, and it's really important.
Yep, 100% agree. Oh, totally agree. And kind of, it's a good way to kind of lead into the topic for today, or the title of this episode, which is finding your flow. So if people are feeling a little bit overwhelmed and they feel like they kind of a little bit off track, what are some of the ways, or how should they be thinking, analyzing? What can they do to kind of get themselves back on track?
Well, can I give you a little bit of an example
Sure.
first?
Yeah.
Because I reckon some of the stuff that would actually help people understand what it might be that they need right now.
Right.
So I was talking to a client the other day, and he said that he had been helping his family, like at the drop of the hat. If someone asked him to do something, he'd just go and do it. There was no question about it. He'd just do it, just what he'd always done. Right. And I'm talking about his wife, his kids, his parents who are getting older, and some of his mates as well. So we all know you want to lend someone a lawnmower on the weekend, that's always going to be I'll come and drop it off to you kind of thing. So for him, he said that one day he just cracked it, and he didn't know really what was going on for him, but he turned his phone off and he went for a really big long drive. He played some music that he hadn't listened to for a while, and that music sparked the memory of who he used to be.
Wow.
And he said by the end of his trip, his little road trip, he knew that his family were like a little bit concerned about him because it was really out of behavior for him. And that was his moment where he felt like he'd hit a wall. It was his change catalyst to pay attention to doing something different. So he kind of wanted some help as to how do we, if you like, avoid hitting the wall again and having a freak out moment, as he called it. Yeah. And also freaking out his family, because that's a little bit concerning if you're doing something different, and people kind of notice these days, I think. Sure. So he just used it as a bit of a wake up call to say, well, how do I actually go about finding myself? And he noticed that he had been probably drinking too much and doing some things in his life that weren't serving him very well, and he had given up on all his healthy habits, like even if it was just going for a walk in the morning with his wife, he'd stopped doing that. So it really was his focus, I suppose, to change. But what he noticed about all of that was there was some stuff that he'd forgotten that was really important to him in his life that he had just put on hold, and it was because he wasn't able to say no to people in a respectful way that he just did everything for everyone else before himself. Mm-hmm. So we really started to look at his priorities and how he could start to really build that into his schedule, if you like. because if we don't look after ourselves first, we do tend to hit that wall. And what I see as a common thing is people saying, oh God, I feel like I'm being backed into a corner, and you throw your hands up and you go, no more, right? Back off. For me, it'd probably be a little bit more blunt. Probably wouldn't let myself get to that place now.
Yeah,
I've learnt my lessons, but
yeah.
for him, it was like he really felt like he'd been backed into the corner, and he really had nowhere to go, and he felt like he just kind of had no breathing space, I suppose. So we sort of started working through that sense of overwhelm and really looking at what he needed. And it was actually pretty simple when he got going. It wasn't always comfortable, but let me share a little bit about what it was. So
Sure.
he really needed to look at what was important to him in his life. And I know, there's a lot of focus out there on coaches just want to focus on goals, but actually no, it's beyond that. It's about looking at your goals and having something that you can really connect to for your why or your purpose, for sure. If you're life's a bit like a needle in a haystack, or a dart on a dartboard that's just far too far away and you're never going to get to it. But it's really getting in touch with what it is that you need and finding out what's important in your life and why it's important. We forget about the why it's important. So we go, oh, here's our to-do list. But if we don't understand why we need to do those things, it's never going to land, or we won't stay on course.
Yep.
And then the other part of that is to set your priorities out of that. So that's to make sure that what it is that you're doing in your day, in your week, your month, and your year is focused on what's the most important to you to get done and what's going to give you that satisfaction factor. So it goes beyond, broader than just goals. Let's do goals. Well, yay, but so what? What do you do with those goals once you've got them? Now, how do you get there? Well, you've got to break them down, and the only way to do that is to know what's important to you every single day, and to do that, and to have something done every day that feels tangible and that you can feel good about. That also means that you need to start a bit of a reflection in your day, is to go, okay, right, I feel really good about those things that I've done. I feel really good about those interactions that I had with those people who are the most important people to me. And I feel really good about those interactions with my colleagues or my workmates, because I know that I was able to help them, or however it is for you. So, those things are really important. And just the usual the SMART tools, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and targeted. Really important little tool. And I think it's a really small distinction, but having those really important priorities and knowing what is going to help keep us on course every day, that'll actually keep us following through on those things, not giving up on that because you're getting distracted with lots of other things.
Yeah.
And then on that note, the other thing is to get really clear on who's important to you in your life and why they're important. One of the things that I notice about the givers in the world, who are the beautiful, generous people who are just giving, is that when you need help or when they need help, no one's around to help them because no one's been used to, giving the help. So, notice who's around you, who's the most important people in your life, who they are, why they're important to you, and let them know they're important to you as well, because life's too short. I was talking to another client the other day, and he said to me, a mate reached out to me 3 days ago, and he's a really good mate, but I feel really bad because I haven't got back to him. And I said, what's stopping you from getting back to him? He said, I don't know. And I said, conversation continued a little bit. And really what it came down to was he was just in such a place of overwhelm. Plus he also felt, because he'd been working so much, that he didn't have anything interesting to say to his friend.
Right.
And he actually felt like he wasn't able to give any value. So if you've got people who's important to you in your life, let them know. Use your words. Show them that you love and care about them.
True. And the other good point is, even if we think we don't have value, we have a lot of value. That person wouldn't have reached out in the first place.
That's right, yeah. And they care about you if they're actually speaking to you. People just naturally fall away, I think, without just because life gets busy. And, some people stay in your life more consistently, and some people show up at different points in time, and just some people fall away altogether. And I think it's just good to be okay with all of those things. But if you know that people are important to you, let them know, because we're all going through our own, navigating our own version of this every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of almost fill in the blanks of what we think other people think and feel. And as I would say to anyone, don't make up stories about what you think or how other people feel about you. Ask them, have a conversation, because it's not real until you have that, until you find out, managed by facts, if you like.
Yeah.
So
Those assumptions can be so wrong.
so wrong, and just because someone's not talking to you, maybe the question is, hey, how are you going? Do you want to do a virtual coffee, Darren? As opposed to thinking, oh, they're not talking to me and they don't care because they're too busy or whatever. As humans, we do this. We make stories up based on what we do or don't hear. Even then, when we hear someone's words, we're still making stories up, but just don't. It's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Create space in your brain and your heart for hearing and feeling what the other person has to say and what they need. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. Do you have any tips on how people can prioritize what's important to them every day? Like, do you subscribe to any particular methodology whereby you sit down every morning at a certain time and write a list, or how do you actually go about that?
Yeah, I do. I'm a believer for intention setting. Yeah.
So every day you do this?
Every day. So my routine is pretty well structured. I know what works for me. I think there is, if people are afraid of a little bit of structure in their day, and I find that fascinating. Now, I'm not talking about every minute of the day accounted for. It's not about that. But, I used to be a project manager many, many years ago, and I, in my personal life, I really resisted the structure, if you like. So I was like, I've got too much structure in my work life, too much. And I was working crazy hours at the time and probably a little bit insane, but I resisted the structure in my personal life, but I made peace with it, because otherwise life goes by really quickly. And I think it was the decision that I made to get a personal trainer, to actually have something to leave. This sounds a bit sad, but to leave work for a personal trainer, because I'd be having to pay him if I didn't turn up.
Yep.
And that was my catalyst to actually change. And then you make that one adjustment and then more adjustments come. But what I do now, I'm a believer of getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I can hear in Queensland, it's a no-brainer because it's kind of daylight around that time. So no daylight saving. And but I make good use of that time. I wake up, I do a meditation first thing in the morning.
Nice.
Or I can do some stretches or some exercise here at home, or go for a walk. Then I'll, be plugging in something useful like a podcast into my ears, Darren.
Absolutely, I agree.
And and then then I start my day. So I'll start my day and I set my intention about what I've got to look at from a work perspective, who I'm working with. So with the clients that I work with during the day.
Yep.
And I'll sit here and I kind of almost meditate on it. I'll write my list of what I've got to do in my day. And it's not just about seeing clients, but it's about the to-do list.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very clear. So I've shared with you SMART a little bit earlier. That's a simple little framework to use: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and targeted. And that then helps me understand who it is that needs to be participating in my day to help me do my day, because it's not always about just me.
That's right.
There's people that I need to rely on to help me do what I do. And then, like I said, I get really clear about the intention of how I'm going to be interacting with people, and, really choose my attitude, I suppose. I know in a day, you can't be perfect every single day, and I'm not perfect anyway, but what I can do is choose how I show up for myself and other people in my day. And when I consciously do that, the outcome of my day feels good. I don't feel like I've even worked, to be perfectly honest. And then with my clients, the outcome's better for them too. Yep. So I don't see that that's any different from how I would have shown up in the workplace. The only difference is how other people choose to show up and what they're consciously aware of. But if they're not having a great day and they're not flowing, that's not something I take on board. I might have done once upon a time, but it's not personal.
Yeah. And I'm the same as you. I love a bit of structure. I love, a little bit of structure. I like a routine because then I know what I'm doing, and it's less mentally draining to be wondering and guessing, and you're organized. Like organization is big, and good systems are very important because it actually saves you a lot of time and energy.
Everyone that I talk to that says I'm feeling overwhelmed, the common denominator is there's no structure in their day.
They're not organized. Yep.
And they miss out on interactions with people that are just beautiful because that's the friendship stuff. Because they're living in a period of chaos in that day or that moment. That's what they focus on. So the moment you focus on that, that's what you get more of, and it just kind of compounds through the day. Then you get other people's chaos adding to that. So I say kind of set some structure in your day, allow, even if it's 5 minutes a day of doing something healthy for yourself, making sure you drink water and have time to have a coffee with a mate if you can.
Or walk around the block or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Go, for you and I would go and sit in a cafe and have a change of scenery and do those things. Laptop we can take and work from anywhere. Not always possible for every single person, but I think the key is making sure that you do change your scenery during the day is important. Yep. But the structure, my structure allows me to do some of that stuff.
So true. Awesome. And so what are you focusing on these days in terms of work? And how are you working these days? Anything in particular? Any particular niche?
Well, I am mainly working with men at the moment. I do work with some women, but the age group that I work with is between 35 and 45 men, is the usual sort of standard group.
Yep.
I work with them, and as I mentioned in Bruce's, the joinery coach business, but also outside as well. So I've actually got a masterclass coming up on the 10th of April, which is called Find Your Flow. So it's part of my Unleash Your Superpowers program through the Bold Step, which is all part of my kind of broader programs that I offer. And what I love about that masterclass is it really helps people find their flow and get over some of these hurdles that get in the way from living their fullest potential. It doesn't matter whether they're a leader in business or a leader in their life. I think the same thing is that we're all individuals first, and how do we help ourselves? How do we feel better? How do we release the pressure? So that's the focus.
Awesome. And why do you find, the age group is to 45? It seems to be capped at 45.
That just seemed to be who's in my life. I mean, look, I'm my age, I'm going to be 51 this year, but I think they're the people that seem to come to me naturally for help because they want to help. They want help. I'm not saying that I won't help people a little bit older or my age group or their age group, but they just seem to be the people I'm working with right now. I do work with a few women as well, but it does seem to be more broadly men. And I think what the common denominator is with that too is that they've hit that wall. Like they've probably had families, they're in their peak of their career period. As they see it right now for themselves, they're not making different life choices. Like around my age group, perhaps people are going, okay, no, I don't want to do that, and moving on to different things. But in that peak age group, where they're making those career choices, they've had families, they're going, okay, right, things are just a little bit too much right now. That's where I see those lifestyle changes needing to be made so they can sustain healthier life, reduce the stress. Probably their partners are telling them or saying to them, you've got to do something different, dude, because we never see you, you're never around. So I think there's some patterns there around those guys needing help. That's not to say that we don't need help around our age group too, Darren.
Absolutely.
But it just, I think there's those bigger aha moments through that
time. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I do think there's trends around where you would choose to be a business owner or go out on your own, or whether you stay in your career path if you're working in an office-based type career. And then whether you step up or step sideways. I think there's all those sort of choices around what's next for people in that age group.
Nice. And do you work with people, obviously one-on-one coaching, you do workshops, any other way that you work with people?
yeah, I work with groups as well. So through I've got a program which is called the Bold Step, and yeah, it's that program's got another round launching in April actually. So there'll
Nice.
be a 12-week program that'll be kicking off in April to get going and to help overcome some of these things that we've been talking about today, and to find your flow.
Love it.
Because
Find your
you
flow.
always
I
have
just
to
love that.
beat potholes and speed humps.
Yep, absolutely. And even when we do, water is a perfect example. Water can flow over it or sideways. You just
The
got to
amount of
find your
people that
flow.
I've talked to that don't drink water in their day, I'm like, you've got to have water to flow.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Awesome. And so Lynda, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
My website, so I know you'll add the link there
Mhm.
in the podcast notes there below, which is it's lyndatregoweth.com. And shall I spell it for you, Darren?
Oh no, don't worry. I'm going to make sure that that's spelled properly.
Two names I've got to spell. And I'll send you a book a call link if anyone wants
Awesome.
to connect with me and jump on a call with me. That'd be great.
Awesome. And if people want to find out about your workshop coming up, is that on your website?
It is on my
Yep.
website. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, Lynda, thank you so much again. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I love hearing, the way the simplicity in how you explain things and how you give people ideas and strategies. It's so common sense and simple and seamless, but it's so powerful. If people only would just take a bit of time to do these things, it's amazing what we could achieve.
Thanks, Darren. Simple is the way to go. We
Simple. Keep it
overcomplicate
simple.
things and keep
Absolutely.
it simple. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big
Thank
believer
you.
in that.
Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to put all the notes and the links for everybody in the show notes so you can find Lynda. Anything that you want to leave us with before we finish up?
Well, I think the first thing is what do you need to forgive yourself for? So what do you need to cut yourself some slack on, if you like?
Nice.
But really, just, you owe it to yourself to just be a bit more gentle and to invest in yourself a little more, and not be so busy that you forget who you are.
Yeah, so true. Wow. Love it. Well, Lynda, thank you so much for coming on the show. Always an absolute pleasure. I've had such a great time talking. And everybody out there, please find Lynda. I'm going to put all the notes in there for you. And we'll hope she'll join us again for another episode at some time in the future.
Thanks,
So,
Darren.
Lynda, thanks again. Everybody out there, have a great day. And we'll see you very, very soon for another episode of Playing with Perspective, the Suspended Animation Podcast. Bye for now.